And we're live.
Hi, I'm Deborah Lucci from the Deborah Lucci team in Andover, Massachusetts, a little bit of north of Boston. And we're here today and we're going to talk with John DiStefano about appraisals. And I can't think of anybody that might have a tougher job right now than John DiStefano. He's kind of the guru of appraisers in our area. So we invited him on today to chat. And we're here today with team members Diana Silva, Mackenzie Cormier, there's John DiStefano, and then Nicole Leahy. So, John, tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, things like that.
Well, my career began as a broker back in the mid-'70s. Right out of high school, and I put myself through college selling real estate, and then off to into banking and into appraising. And by the mid-1990s, I started my own company, Fidelity Appraisal Services, and that morphed into First Fidelity Appraisal Services of New England, and here I am today.
So, John, where do you do your appraisals? Like, how many people are in your company? What area do you cover?
Well, we had a large footprint up until recently. We tooled it back down because the volume is so great. I have 14 people, but we were covering southern Maine, New Hampshire, all of Massachusetts. But now with the volume so heavy, we have to really cut it back. We can't service such a broad territory and maintain our primary clients. So our radius is down to Massachusetts, just eastern Massachusetts, and we're buried with work.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that the girls have a lot of questions. I'm going to ask you just a couple to kind of get started. When you meet, typically when you go out to a property to appraise a property and it is a purchase, what do you like to the listing agent to bring?
Well, the best thing to do to start off is the floor plans. If you have one of those floor sketches you folks do, that's really helpful. It saves some time. The second thing is list of updates. What was performed in that residence in the past 15, 20 years, either by the previous owner or the current owner. And of course, the purchase and sales, I think I said that already. The comparables, if you want to bring along comparables, that's fine with us. Some appraisers will accept that, others may not. But I would always take your market data. It's always helpful to see what you folks know about the local market as much as myself. And if there's any comments on those comparables, perhaps one was a divorce case, perhaps one was a family feud, or something may have been happening that could have brought that one comparable into the wrong column of value, if you will. And we may want to dismiss that comparable if there's something went on with that sale that could cause us to say, it's no good because of a stressful transaction or a stressful sale. Or maybe it could have been where you couldn't even show the house because of an issue again in the family. So many things.
No, so you said updates. How many years around do you like those?
Oh, years, about 10 to 15. I'm sorry, about 10 years is fine. 5 to 10 years, most important. And there's a reason for that too, Deb. We're mostly important. We'll let you know about the kitchens, the bathrooms, the heating system, the roof, the windows, the flooring, and if there's been anything else that was added on to the home. So that's important.
It's funny because we put an appraisal package. I mean, I've been doing this 24 years and running by the seat of my pants. When I first started, I had none of that for the appraiser at all. I would just show up and open the door. And now we have, what's called frequently asked questions and the list of all the updates internally, externally. We have all the floor plans ready. I mean, P&S. So yeah, we pretty much finally, that's pretty much organized for the appraiser. So Nicole, you had a lot of questions regarding appraisals. What are some of your questions?
My questions was, I have a few, so I'm looking at my list, but I want to know how far back do you go when you're looking at comps? Because I mean, obviously right now the market is insane. And what was 6 months ago doesn't even apply. But in a normal market, maybe it does. So how far back do you normally go, and how far back are you going right now with these crazy increases?
Well, we're doing two things. We're going back initially 6 months. And if we can find a comp. Now, when you talk the word of a comp, what is a comp? And what qualifies to be a comparable versus just a sale? But if we have sufficient market data that lines up within the neighborhood, that lines up with design and GLA, gross living area, bedroom utility and bathroom utility, and that's a comparable. And we can go back 6 months by the bank's guidelines as preferred, and we can always go back a little bit further if necessary if we can't find that data within that first 6 months. Then we can zoom out, if you will, and broaden our radius. We like to be within a half mile to a mile and a half, and then finally you can go right across town if necessary. And there's on occasions too, Nicole, that we have to go out of the town to find data.
John, can you use under agreements?
We can, but not as the primary three. The appraiser must provide 3 closed comparable at minimum. And he can use additional comparables as pendings or actives or even other closed sales as additional supportive data.
You know, I'm finding as I do, you know, mostly listings, I'm finding it very difficult to price houses in this market. It's almost like the solds are getting to be old comps. It's very difficult because this market is changing so rapidly, and all you can really look at is, okay, to me, when I price a house, this house went under at this price here. And
Yeah.
unless, you know, you have some other data, because somebody will tell you what it's going under for, you really don't know. So
Right.
so what are you finding out there? Like when you're appraising property and you get a copy of the like purchase and sale, are you finding a lot of appraisals are crossed out? Are you finding language like a buyer makeup will make up a difference? Like, what are you finding out there? What are some of the complications?
Well, starting with the most recent one you just mentioned, the finding that the purchase and sales buyers, that clause you might have in there, it must comp out. We're seeing less and less of that today because it may not comp out, particularly this time of the year. When the spring market hits, the market has a tendency of jumping, and it jumped another 5% or so within the past few weeks, only because the historical data we have of comparable sales being back in 2020 is almost irrelevant. So here we are seeing the spring market, and of course the market's hedging forward. So finding a comparable now is difficult, and I think any broker taking a listing, I mean a sale rather, over the asking and keeping that clause in there is very dangerous. You know, that you may back out if it doesn't comp out. So that's the first part I would be caution any broker on doing. And
Now, John, so let's say, for example, you know the house down the street sold for 800.
Yeah.
Okay, it sold for 800 in November of last year,
Mm-hmm.
and the market's gone up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take the sale on the house that just closed, even if it's like almost exact comps? I mean, it's not going to close at the same price. It's going to probably close higher. Can you take a certain percentage and raise it up?
We can adjust within for time between November and current. I mean, it's only about 3 or 4 months, but it's not much of a time adjustment. The market has pulled forward greater than a few months of market time. So, you know, the banks are fine with us using a time adjustment. You know, maybe 0.5% a month is probably more the norm. But in reality, the market's going further and faster than 0.5% per month. But if we find a comparable 6 months ago, adjusting it 3% is not going to do it.
Right.
So you really want to find most recent sales. And hopefully now we'll see some of those closes that went under agreement back in February. And there the market the value would now reflect, you know, current conditions. But just to add on to that, Deb, there's no reason why the appraiser can't use a pending sale, as we spoke about a few minutes ago. A pending sale can be used as supportive data, and if we know the contract price, and if it can be disclosed to us safely by all parties agreeing, we can disclose that in the analysis to the underwriter that this comp here is going to close a few weeks from now, and yet that one there tells the true market value of the current time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So now, how do you view private sales?
It's difficult because you can't always see what the properties, what it's included in that transaction. We don't know if there's personal property. We don't know the condition of the dwelling. We don't know if the basement's finished. There may be some improper information in there from the public records versus what is truly going on with that property. So the benefit by an MLS sale is that we get to see the interior of the property. We get a chance to talk to the broker, and we can discover truly what that sale incorporates, not just a name and an assessor's card from a private sale. That's a dangerous. It's a good comp to consider, but we don't want to hang our hat on it because its verifiable source is limited, if you will. Okay.
So I always wondered, why do appraisers take pictures if there's so many pictures on the multiple listing service?
Oh no, that's a good point. The bank provides would ask us to provide photographs. So I think we just do it as a normal course of business to satisfy them, to show the comparable at that point in time. I'm sorry, the subject at that point in time. But there's been times when we would have to use an interior photograph that you may have taken, only because one, we've forgotten, two, the camera could glitch, or three, we're doing an exterior appraisal. So, we're doing these, what's called the COVID appraisals now. Have you heard of that?
And I have a question actually in terms of that. So if you do they call it desktop appraisals also, right? So
Yeah.
if I'm the listing agent on that and it doesn't appraise, am I allowed to request another, but on-site appraisal?
Yeah, that's a good question for your lender, not for the appraiser.
Okay.
Yeah, the lender makes the decision, not the appraiser.
And what makes that up? Like
Don't know. I can't speak for the lender, but there's certain criterion that allows the lender to consider the desktop. And then there's an issue where, like you just said, Diana, that if the value comes in short or perhaps something's missed in the analysis from the desktop, then can the broker, can someone request the appraiser go into the home and collect better data? And that's where the lender has to weigh in versus the appraiser. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, I have another question too. So how do seller concessions affect an appraisal? Do they at all?
That's a great one. Yes, they do. If a home sells for $410,000 and there's a $10,000 concession, the appraiser is going to subtract that from the purchase price of $410,000. So when you disclose it in the MLS, which I believe you're supposed to do, is that correct? Then we would, as an appraiser, subtract that out of off the contract price, the sales price.
Now, John, if you have an FHA property and let's say it sells for $245,000 and they give $10,000 back for closing costs, what does it have to appraise at? $245,000 or $235,000?
No, $245,000. The contract price is $245,000. And so if we appraise it at $235,000, then of course the lender is going to lend off at $235,000. But the contract price is $245,000. The $10,000 concession is going back to is a consideration going back to the buyer, and that's where the bank requires us to subtract that from that comparable.
Interesting. I know you probably, I don't know if you'll be able to even answer this, but we talked about it, that people are waiving everything, but how risky is waiving the appraisal?
And that's a good point. The market's going so fast, and you go to Arlington or any community that even Deb and I have worked on some properties together, that they're selling $100,000 or greater than 10% above asking.
Yeah.
But typically, in that contract, the broker is not going to allow in that contract a comment. They must comp out. I would imagine at that point they're going to waive the financing contingency, and the appraised value is the appraised value, and the buyer can do what he wants with that.
Yeah.
If you go $100,000 above asking, I would prepare yourself to bring in additional funds as a buyer.
Yep.
You may need it.
So Nicole brought something up to me a few weeks ago, and she kind of took me off guard when she said it, because it's something new that I hadn't been presented with before. And she said to me, I just put a property under agreement. I'm the buyer's agent. How would you feel if I, gave the listing agent comps? And I was like, and I took it like, how would I feel? And at first when she said that, I was like, wait, what's the matter? You don't think I can do my job? And so, but it just like last week, someone said to me, Debbie, here's some comps for the house that I put under. And actually I was sort of like, thank you for your help. I greatly appreciate that. So Nicole, let's talk about that too.
Yes.
Because John's got some opinions.
So it's funny too, because as a buyer's agent in the past, I feel like, if it doesn't appraise out, then okay, maybe, you don't want your buyer to overpay for a property. So maybe it can be renegotiated and they can get it more for the value. But in this market, you want it, especially if they put appraisal language in there, you want it to comp out for these buyers so badly so they don't have to put up the extra cash at closing. So it's like you're almost rooting for them you and the listing agent is just on the same team on this, and you're rooting for it to happen.
Well, more importantly too, Nicole, that you want to see your buyer, your client, get that home.
Right.
They want to pay that price they've offered. You don't want to see them lose that opportunity because, of course, the inventory is so light, so difficult to come by that they may have to wait another 6 months to find a home. So what I would do as the buyer's agent, I would try to go to the inspection with the appraiser, particularly if it goes above asking and there's backup buyers for this property. There's no reason why you can't represent your buyer, and I'm representing the buyer's bank. So we're all there to represent the buyer in some capacity. I represent the client. I don't advocate for the buyer, but I represent the client, which is the buyer's bank. So if you're present and you can hear the conversation and you can weigh in on some of those comparables, particularly if there's a problem comparable in that mix, or you want to add another comp in that mix, there's no reason why you can't speak your mind and add into that conversation about market data. Most appraisers will accept it. I think you might come across one or two that will not want to take market data from anyone but his own process of data collection. But I would still urge to be present, particularly again if it's above asking, you're worried this may fall through, or perhaps there's a condition about the property that may be misunderstood, or conditions in the purchase and sales that may be misunderstood. So,
that's great information.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I was going to ask you too, John, how do you feel when somebody is appealing? Is it, I haven't had to do it or the lender, but is that almost annoying to the appraiser when they get, an appeal, or do you sometimes look at it and say, oh, actually, this is a great comp that I missed? And
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it is annoying. You want to go back in time and start looking at your own files, but the reality is you want to do the right job for your client. Just like you want to support your client, I want to support my client.
Right.
And my client's the lender, and of course he's getting information from you, and he has to pass it on to me. And if he doesn't, then of course, they're going to say your bank is not doing its due diligence to assure that you have the right value here. So if you supply the data to the lender, we'll look at that data, and if my value is going to come in short, I'm not going to tell you my value is going to be short. I'm just going to call you and ask you, did I miss any comps ahead of that? You follow me?
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you the value. Only the bank can receive the value. And then, of course, the bank can disseminate that information as they feel necessary. But if you get a phone call from me, it's going to be because I want some more data, and did I miss any data? Make some sense, too?
Yes.
Okay.
John, I have a quick question. So what happens when you get an appraiser that's not familiar with the area that the house is in? We actually just got a comment about this too, but I had written this down beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like that has been a challenge lately.
Well, how do you know he's not familiar with the territory? That's the first question I would have.
Well, so for example, I know someone in our team, I think it may have been Joanne, she said that on her listing, the comps that she pulled and that the buyer's agent pulled were just completely different from what the appraiser had shown up with, or the comps that they had used. It was like on the other side of town, not even like the same style home, stuff like that. And they knew that he or she from the area.
It's difficult to say if the appraiser knows it. Maybe you can discover that by conversation, but for instance, I live in Wakefield. I mean, my office is in Wakefield. I live in North Andover, and I can cover Methuen, Lawrence. I can cover all the way down to Sudbury, even though I'm not in Sudbury. I'm not a Sudbury resident, or even in that area, but I still know that marketplace. So it's difficult to say that he's out of the area and he's foreign to the neighborhood, or he's foreign to the market, unless you know he is. And the way you're going to know it, he's going to say, geez, I'm unfamiliar with this marketplace. And that's pretty foolish in his end to disclose that. He should be competent in that territory. Every appraiser needs to be competent in that territory, and that's a requirement by the standards that we follow. If you think he's not competent, and that's why, Nicole, going back to your question, being present, you might have the opportunity to acquire that information. And if he's not from the area, and you can sense he's not competent from that territory, you might even ask him, Nicole, Mackenzie, geez, what school system do you think is best in Andover? And if he says, I don't even know the school systems in Andover, then you know you got a problem.
Right.
If he's foreign to that, just to the school systems, we all know that South School is a great school and Sanborn's a great school and others, but we also know that people gravitate to certain marketplaces for that school.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can't recite one school in town, that's a flag.
So John, in the olden days, before the recession, okay, and these guys are too young to remember that, but weren't the appraisals really, appraisers all like really fairly local, and they had sort of a connection with the mortgage broker? And then what happened when, there was probably some shady appraisers, making the house high and it really wasn't that value. So they changed things. And then, so now you don't, the mortgage broker can't even talk to you.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So like, how do you get your appraisals where you are? Would you just like line up with different banks, or how does it work?
Several sources. The primary way we get our banks from our lenders is through an AMC, which is an appraisal management company. So the lender puts a middleman in front of us. The lender, being all your local banks and your large national banks, they go through these various portals and facilitators, and then we actually contract with that facilitator to do that job, and then of course the user is the lender. But our contract is really with that AMC. And then there's some banks that don't use the AMCs, but they have a dedicated personnel within the institution to order the appraisals. And that way there you keep the loan officer away from the appraiser. And going back, what you're referring to, Deb, and to the young ones out there, you're referring to when we had direct contact with the loan officers, and we would get our orders from the loan officers. So as appraisers, if we came in short on a value, the pressure was there that we may not want to do something like that because we may not get any additional work from this particular loan officer in the future, and that's a pressure that we all felt as appraisers. And any appraiser saying he didn't feel that pressure is a fool, but it was there. So we're happy the AMC is present. We're happy that the banks have these intermediator or the individuals within the company, like Mackenzie. You may be the administrator of certain things. That way, we keep the loan officer at distance from the appraiser, and we don't find that pressure to come in on a value, particularly in this marketplace when things are selling so rapid and so high that you often cannot come in on value.
So, John, do you feel that things are coming in like off or like really low lately, or are they starting to level out a little bit more? What do you think?
Well, we've had 12. Well, it's been since 2012, Deb. We've seen this marketplace grow substantially in value. Would you not agree?
It bottomed out. I think it bottomed out in December of 2012, and it's climbed up ever since.
It's climbed. So our values have been. We've seen this marketplace expand for more than almost 10 years now of positive growth, which is substantial growth. And I don't know when it's going to pop. But typically you see it either an event causes the marketplace to pop, or you might find, the market values leveling off, and then you may find a curve coming at you, a decline. But it's tough to say. I know interest rates are so sensitive to everyone, and the refi market to me is so important that without that refi market, we'd have less volume, and low interest rates are the governor of volume from the refi market, and even for sales. And if interest rates should pop up another, to 4% or so or better, it probably won't stop the market, but it may slow down the pricing. It may pull back on the pricing. It's going to take a bite out of the buyer's purchasing power. So that's a little bit of a concern. But I don't know when this market's going to tip over, but there's an old saying, I don't know. I certainly know a bubble when I see one, and we may be looking at a bubble sometime in the future.
You know, it's hard to project because one of the things I was listening to this morning is this gentleman that is a coach was saying that this is probably going to be going on for another couple of years because you've got such huge buying power with the millennials out there right now.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to ask you this too. I mean, this was a little while ago, but I had a property and the mortgage broker thought she was doing me a favor. And I don't really know her that well. And, but she thought she was doing me a favor by ordering just a desktop appraisal, and it was an FHA loan. And it was no favor at all because it was an appraiser that was way out west that didn't know the area at all, came in undervalued, and it actually put so much more work on my plate. We ordered it. We actually said, look, go get another appraisal and we'll meet her out at the house. So they actually got somebody fairly local and it worked out fine. But, we were seeing a lot of desktops at one point. Are you seeing those as much now, or are they starting to go away?
No, they're still with us. I believe the government extended that out a little bit further. I believe they were going to sunset this past January. They're going to do away with the desktops because they thought COVID was under control. But apparently we still have them, and they're fine to contend with as appraisers. I kind of enjoy them to some level. What I'm concerned about is the FHA. I'm an FHA appraiser, and I've seen some FHA orders come over as desktops, and I've rejected the assignment. I don't know why they're even ordering an FHA desktop because you have to do an inspection of that property for FHA, and to depart from that scope of work may be concerning for FHA. So I'm uncertain if you can do an FHA desktop appraisal. I know I've refused to do them. And so I've never done it. I can't attest to if they've been available to us because I won't do them because you have to inspect certain things in the home. The appliances, the windows. There's certain things you have to modify to make sure it's correct in that home. Even the heating system and any problems that could cause safety problems for the lender can't be observed through MLS.
That's interesting. I have another question on. I know that you said that the list of updates that you look back at, but are there other things that negatively affect a home appraisal?
From what standpoint of collecting market data?
No, so like some of the things like aging condition of do you look at the aging condition of the HVAC, if it's, or the, plumbing, it's, electrical appliances, you look at all of that, and is there anything that could negatively affect it?
There's always things that can affect it. There could be environmental things, external forces could affect it. On the interior, could be we're measuring. You just mentioned a few things. We're going to measure the effective age of certain components.
Mm-hmm.
There are 6 major components we look at, what's called the short-lived items of a dwelling: the kitchen, the bathrooms, the windows, the flooring, the heating system, and the roof. Those elements of the dwelling expire every 30 or so years. They have an economic life of about 30 plus years. And by going into the home, you can measure, and you can do this yourself, is by asking that question: how old is the kitchen?
Mm-hmm.
If the kitchen's 15 years old, then we know it has half-life. If the roof is 30 years old, then we know it has no life.
Right.
At that point, it's pretty much expired. So those are the components we're trying to examine when we're doing our inspection. So if any of those are negative with their age completely, yeah, sure, there'll be negative impacts. But then you have a brand new kitchen. That's a positive impact.
Yeah.
So, but those are the 6 components of the dwelling that we're going to examine when we walk through.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay. How's that?
John, I have a question too. Is there a specific criteria of value that you give to bedrooms or an extra garage or things like that? So if there's a similar home you're looking at, which I assume if it's, if you're appraising the Cape, you're looking at other Capes or a ranch, and if it has an extra garage or if the basement is done, is there a monetary value you put on those things?
You're asking, is there a standard adjustment?
Yeah.
For those? And that's a difficult answer to give, because the correct answer would be no. There's no set adjustments. Adjustments come from the marketplace by abstraction. So we'll look at 2. Let's just take a ranch from a 3-bedroom ranch with 2 bathrooms and a 2-car garage. And if you found one comp that had a 2-car garage and one comp the same elements having just only 1-car garage, you can abstract the difference. And that's called the principle of contribution. So we can't always find those things. And then there we'll start playing with some adjustments that we rely upon based on our history and our knowledge of that marketplace. So I try to give you some answers, but they come with a little bit of a caveat. A garage may be about $10,000 per bay. A bathroom may be about $10,000. A basement recreation room may be $10,000. And I don't know if that answers anything for you, but I'm just trying to emphasize that adjustments come from abstraction, and they come from looking at comparables and finding the delta between one that has and one that has not, that particular element. You follow that at all?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
John's great with information. I called him one time. I think these owners had to spend almost like $400,000 on this pool. And I'm like, John, what is the $400,000 pool worth? You know? And, you know, he kind of gave me a percent of what the cost of the pool was. And, he's answered a lot of my tough questions over the years. So, yeah.
That's a good point, Deb. You know, you might find a very large, expensive home in town, maybe on Regency Way, where an in-ground pool may have a value of maybe $25,000 to $35,000 of a market adjustment. But you might find one, you know, that's just an average run-of-the-mill. It may have less of an impact. So it depends on price bracketing and how important that element, that contribution element, has to the whole value of the dwelling. And a very large home like that, in a well-established high-end value marketplace, may want a pool, and they may, without the pool, you may actually suffer market value. So, or even a 3-car garage, you know, you might find a Regency Way with a 2-car garage, it may be a deficit, a substantial deficit if you don't have a 3-car garage. Do you follow that?
Yeah, no. So, John, the market now for pools, they're much more valuable because now apparently you got 2 years, you got to wait out. So now have you made an adjustment for that waiting period because people have to wait 2 years to get a pool?
That's a good point. We try to see if the market's telling us that. That's you know, again, being the correct answer from an appraiser standpoint. But I think overall we all know the pools have a de minimis value to us in the marketplace. They have a minor impact of value. Some people don't even want the pools too, Deb. We often see people filling them in. So we want to be careful to say that a pool is worth $10,000 without really some good evidence in that marketplace. And again, it's price impacted. So multi-million-dollar homes will have a different impact to contribution.
You ladies have any more questions for John? I'm sure.
That was awesome. That was great. That was all great information.
Anytime somebody needs an appraiser, I got John right on speed dial there. So, I mean, I met John in 1998 before I was a realtor myself. And John appraised 3 of the properties I had. And that's how I met John. So, you know, what's amazing to me, John, this is such an emotional purchase and you're putting it down to numbers.
Yeah.
You know, so it's almost taking the emotion right out of it. So
you're dealing with the clients, you know, your buyers and sellers, and you have an awful lot that's brokers today to contend with, because you're dealing with a very dynamic marketplace, and you're representing both people that want max dollar for their home and people that want to get into the home, buyers. They're having a difficult time getting in. Mm-hmm. So going back there, just real quick, if you don't mind. The values I was talking about, excuse me 1 second. The market values I was talking about, where the marketplace is going, I should say, is I'm thinking that the market may level off. And I'm saying that because we had a very long time, a very extended time of market growth. But because inventory is so light and rates are so positive and employment so wonderful, that it could extend and keep going. So I wouldn't say that the market's going to deflate and fall apart. It's difficult to say, and anyone who can project that really is a fool, because you don't know what forces can change this market at any given time. But I think for your buyers and for your sellers and for your audience, that as long as there's employment, as long as there's reasonable interest rates, and as long as there's reasonable housing source, the value should continue, and market mobility should be constant. We should see sales just continuing on, and maybe the prices adjust a little bit, but certainly there's no reason why the market can't keep going. As far
Yeah,
as
I do think the growth will slow down a little bit, but I still think I think a lot of it because of the age groups and stuff like that we're dealing with between the downsizers and the millennials that they're big groups of people.
Well, there's one more thing I wanted to add to the conversation, if we have another minute, is that we're seeing multi-generational homes become more popular, where you're finding in-laws being added on, and people are designing homes with secondary kitchens and second living areas for a relative or a family member, or mainly for a family member. Obviously, you really can't rent that out. And I don't know if the communities are being more relaxed with it, but there's some towns that welcome it, and there are other towns that are a bit more adverse to it. But if I had the opportunity to build another house today, I would build with a separate apartment in there for an aging parent.
Now, John, I've done about, I don't know, 4 or 5, really in-laws. They're not just in the lower level. They're in-laws.
Add-ons.
And, with different towns. And, most of them go with the person. They don't go with the property. So the new person has to, apply for that. So when you're seeing, like when you talk to a builder, like I know on Shea Lane, there's an in-law down there, and the builder will say to me, "But Debbie, there's 2 kitchens, there's two everything, so it's much more expensive for him to build." But when we see resale, it's hard to get the value of that in-law build.
Well,
back.
there's two things in there, Deb. The first is with the building inspector is when someone has a second kitchen in their home, they still need to have a permit to have that in there, and then to have the continuation of the use of that kitchen. That's when you talk about the annual reapplying to the community for the additional occupant to stay in the home. So you need the building permit to acquire and to build the structure, and then of course you need to maintain that by permits throughout the year. And that's fairly constant between most communities I've experienced. You just can't put a secondary kitchen in your home and call it in-law without having some repercussion from the community. I would always be cautious, anyone that would do something like that, but don't violate your town guidelines.
No, you'll pay for it when you go to sell the house.
Yeah, well, you can pay for it even with fines,
Mm-hmm.
So be careful with that. And as a broker, you want to make sure if you come across a home that has a second kitchen in it, to make sure it is properly permitted. It was properly permitted at that time. In other words, he didn't sneak it in there or didn't put it in there for his parents, without the stove. I did one home in Andover. I can't say the address, but it had 3 kitchens in it. And I told the homeowner I got to call the building inspector and see if these are legally permitted. She goes, no, don't call. So they had 3 kitchens.
Wow. So what did they have to do with the kitchens? Did they have to pull them apart?
The deal died because if I called the community, she would be in trouble. But I told the bank, and they said, "Well, we're not going to do the loan," so they backed out. So I didn't want to see the homeowner get in trouble, but I knew you can't have 3 kitchens in a home with 3 separate living units and call yourself a single family.
Right.
Yeah, if you see that second stove, it's a red flag. Was there a permit pulled? If you don't deal with it, an appraiser is going to come in and deal with it. So
we have to. Yeah, we have to. We have to disclose what we see. So, and that's the other reason why you want the photographs too. So.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
What if you have like a cabana or like a pool house or like something like that, and it doesn't have a stove in it, but it just has more of like a kitchenette with like a fridge and a sink? Was that an issue at all?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you had above the barn, above the garage, an in-law suite with a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen, a functioning kitchen, but you're talking about something that's used for the seasonal use of a pool with a little kitchenette for refrigeration, maybe something to do a little cooking for some hamburgers and hot dogs. I don't think that would be classified as a kitchen itself. It's when you get into a living unit that becomes a problem for you, Mackenzie. Okay.
Do you have any more questions, ladies?
No, this is great.
Yeah,
All
this
right,
is awesome.
we went over a little. I knew we would on this subject. I knew this was going to be a hot subject coming up. So, John, how do people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, they can always call you first.
Yeah, I have you on. Yeah.
I call you
Speed dial.
first, I suppose they want to call me directly for a divorce appraisals or for perhaps an estate appraisal. They can contact me through my number at 781-295-0200. It's my office. And my cell phone is 781-389-5456.
Okay, well, that's it for today's show. I'm Debbie Lucci from the Deborah Lucci team, William Ravis Realtors, and my website is wherehomesgetsold.com. And Diana, Mackenzie, and Nicole, tell them how they can get in touch with you.
You can get in touch with me by diana.silva@ravis.com, or my website is dianasilvarealtor.com.
Yep, and my website is NicoleLeahy.com. Very easy.
And my website is cormierproperties.com.
All right, well, thank you very much, John. We'll probably have you back again sometime. That was a great Facebook Live. We appreciate you showing up and giving us such great information.
Right, I'm happy to help. So thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.